Hello friends! In this video, I'm going to show you 5 different techniques for making some really fun wooden magnets. I got my magnets at the Goodwill in this big grab bag, but you can get these wooden shapes from any craft store. Of course, check out your local thrift stores. You can really use any sort of wooden shape you want. The size, the thickness, all of that doesn't really matter. Just find some shapes and you can use these techniques on anything. The first technique we'll be doing today is using scrapbook paper. So for this, you can use any sort of scrapbook paper that you have. You can use scraps of your scrapbook paper. You can use any sort of cardstock, anything you have lying around. I found this really fun pack of summer patterns on sale at Joann's, so I decided to grab it and flip through it to find a fun fruit-themed pattern. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the summer feeling, but I've been very into fruit patterns lately, so I chose this really cute strawberry pattern that we're going to put onto our magnet. I'm going to start out by tracing my heart shape onto the back of my scrapbook paper pattern. Now this is a very loose tracing outline. You just want to trace around your shape so that you can cut away all of the excess paper and save it for something else. So you can see my outline is very rough, not at all close to the heart shape. You just want to get a general idea of what you can cut away and what you'll need for the actual magnet shape. Once you've got your shape cut out, you'll want to lay it on top of your magnet just to make sure that you've got everything fully covered, and then you can go right into adhering it to your wooden shape. To do this, I'm going to use some Mod Podge. Now you can use glossy or matte, it doesn't matter, just depends on what you want the final look to be. For this particular magnet, I'm going to finish off by sealing it with some UV resin. So the finish of the Mod Podge to me, it didn't really matter. So I'm going to take a little bit of the Mod Podge and I'm going to brush it onto the heart shape, and then I'll also brush a little bit of it onto the scrapbook paper as well, and then I'll just line up the paper with the shape and press everything down really well to make sure everything is nicely adhered and we don't have any wrinkles or bubbles. Once I have my scrapbook paper adhered to my wooden shape, I'm immediately going to go in with a 60 grit sanding block, and I'm going to start to sand off all of the excess scrapbook paper from around my shape. So this technique might be easier if you use a more simple shape like a square, a circle, a heart, anything like that. If you use anything a little more intricate, doing this sanding process will be more difficult. Not impossible, it'll just be a little bit tougher to get into those smaller nooks and crannies of any more intricate piece that you decide to use. But basically what I'm doing here is taking my sanding block and I'm sanding at about a 45-degree angle. Now this is going to take a little bit of time to get that scrapbook paper removed from itself. You know, you're kind of just sanding off the edges. Just stick with it, be really gentle. You don't need to use a lot of pressure here. And what you're going to end up with is basically a perfectly shaped piece of scrapbook paper on your heart. I really like this technique over trying to cut away the excess with a craft knife or any other technique. I find that sanding the edges down gives it a really nice finish, and you kind of have that little bit of distressed look on the edges, which I really like. Once I'm done sanding, I'm just going to take a dry rag or towel and wipe away all of the sanding residue. Remember, we don't have anything on top of our scrapbook paper at this point, so you don't want to use any sort of rubbing alcohol or anything like that to clean off your piece. Just take the dry towel and wipe away the sanding residue and you'll be good to go. So once that is done, I'm going to let this sit and dry for maybe about 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, I'm going to go in with another couple coats of the Mod Podge over the top of the paper to make sure that it's really well sealed. Now, of course, if you want to, you can be done there. You don't have to do the final coat of UV resin, but I did it on one of the magnets that we're going to do a little bit later, and I had some UV resin left over, so I decided to just go ahead and put it on this one as well. But the matte finish of the Mod Podge looks really, really pretty too, so it's really just personal preference for what you want the end result to look like. After that second coat of the Mod Podge over the paper was dry, again I waited about maybe 10-15 minutes, I'm going to do that final coat of UV resin to seal everything in. And now, like I said, as you can see, the matte finish is actually really pretty, and I'm kind of thinking about making another one of these without the glitter and UV resin on the top because I really like how the matte finish looks. But anyway, you'll see what the matte looks like, and then you'll see what it looks like with the UV resin and a little bit of glitter mixed in. For the glitter, I used Chickalay from Peachy Olive Glitters, and I just put a little tiny bit of it into the UV resin, mix it all together, and now I'm applying that to my magnet with a popsicle stick. This is a really, really thin coat. It's maybe like 1 milliliter to 2 milliliters of the UV resin. Just do a really, really thin, even coat, and then you can cure it under your UV lamp for 1 to 2 minutes, and you'll be all done. For our second design technique, we're going to use two of my favorite things, pattern vinyl and glitter. So for this second heart magnet, I'm going to split it in half horizontally, just using some painter's tape and doing a rough visual estimate. I didn't measure or anything, I just did an eyeballed half. And I'm going to start out with my patterned vinyl section. The glitter I'm going to use on the magnet is Athena from Peachy Olive Glitters, so I wanted to find a pattern vinyl that would match really well with that. So I'm going to go through these little 6x6 sheets of vinyl that I have from Glamour Tribe Vinyl. These are basically just miniature sheets of the full-size sheet she has available on her website, and I get a lot of questions about how the heck you can use these, and these are really perfect for small little projects like this. So if you're making magnets, keychains, badge reels, smaller tumblers, these work for all of those kind of smaller projects, and you don't have to use a really big sheet of vinyl, and you also get the smaller scale of the pattern, of course. So I picked this pattern called You Prickle My Fancy, and I'm going to line my magnet up with the pattern to map out how much of the vinyl I actually need to use. I'll just draw a rough shape around that and then cut out the rectangle, and then we can apply it to our magnet. Now, applying this vinyl to the magnet is really easy. You just peel it off the backing and stick it down like a sticker. Now, really taping off your magnet isn't super necessary. I more so did it just to visualize how big the top half of my magnet would be, like the ratio of vinyl to glitter. So you don't have to tape off your magnet if you don't want to, you can just eyeball it. And what I'm going to do here is show you the difference between using your craft knife to cut off the excess versus sanding off the excess. So using a craft knife, you can get a nice clean cut, you can get the excess away, but it's just a little bit harder to get a nice smooth cut around these shapes, especially if you are not using a sharp brand new blade. Now, I always say on my channel that you should use a brand new blade when you're cutting vinyl because it does make a huge difference. And here I am using a new blade, and you can see I'm still having a little bit of trouble. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I think sanding off the excess is a whole lot easier. Again, once we're done sanding, we'll just wipe off all of the excess residue with a dry towel, and then we'll remove our tape and replace it over the edge of our vinyl so that we can glitter the bottom half of the shape. To adhere the glitter, I'm going to use this thick glitter glue from Adhesive Apothecary. Of course, if you want to, you can use Mod Podge or whatever adhesive that you like best. We're also not going to base paint our wooden heart. We don't really need to because the color of the glitter kind of matches the color of the wood. So I'm just going to put the glue directly onto the wood, and then we will lay our glitter down. I let that glitter glue dry for about 20 minutes and I left the tape on. Now after 20 minutes, I'm going to seal the glitter with the same Mod Podge that we've been using. I'm just going to do one coat over the glitter to seal it, and I'm going to let that dry for about 30 minutes. Now again, with this magnet, I'm going to use some UV resin as a final sealer. Like I said earlier though, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can just do the Mod Podge, seal everything, and be done. I would recommend though, if you are using glitter on any of your designs, to seal with a glossy finish as your final sealer if you're not going to use any sort of resin or UV epoxy or anything like that. Make sure that over glitter your final sealer is glossy, because if you use a matte finish, it really just kind of takes away from the sparkly effect that the glitter gives you. Now, of course, if you use a matte sealer like I am, and then you put a UV resin or a regular epoxy over it, the glitter will shine back up again just like normal. So just make sure that you're either going to seal your glitter with a resin or a glossy sealer like a Mod Podge or a clear gloss spray or something like that. After applying the UV resin, I let it cure under my lamp for 60 seconds to 2 minutes, and we are on to design number 3. This technique is using a paper napkin, so you can use any sort of decorative kind of napkin that you have lying around, or if you're like me, you can go to TJ Maxx and go crazy buying all of the packs of napkins that are cute so you can make a bazillion magnets with them. I finally settled on this super cute football dog pattern. Now this is a pattern from Home Goods, I believe. Now football season's right around the corner. It's my favorite time of year. And of course I am a dog lady, so I had to use this pattern. I think it's so freaking cute. So what I'm going to do is just cut out one of the squares after unfolding the napkin so that it's fully open. You'll also want to remove the kind of white background from the napkin. It's like a 2-ply type of napkin. So you'll want to remove that white backing part, because if you stick that down to your wooden shape, that's all that's going to transfer. You won't get the actual pattern. So make sure that you remove that white 2-ply portion of the napkin and that you're just using the single piece that has the design on it. For this specific technique, I decided to paint my heart shape white. I'm using a lighter colored napkin, and I wanted to make sure that the colors were as vibrant as possible. So you don't have to paint your shape if you don't want to, or if you're using a darker colored designed napkin, you can probably just put your napkin directly onto your wood, but I painted mine white so that we would get the most color and payoff possible on the heart shape. So I took that same Mod Podge and I painted it all over my heart shape, and then I just took my napkin and laid it directly into the Mod Podge. You want to make sure that your coat of Mod Podge isn't too thick. You don't want a lot of gloopiness or areas where it's really thick, because we're using a super duper thin sheet of paper here, so it's not as forgiving as, say, the scrapbook paper would be. So just make sure that your coat of Mod Podge is really thin and very even. Once the napkin is placed, I waited about 10 minutes for the Mod Podge to dry a little bit, and now I'm going to use some heat to really smooth out the napkin and make everything look really nice. So you can use either like an iron that you would iron your clothes with, or you can use what I'm using here. This is the Cricut Easy Press, and I have it on the medium heat setting. I'm using a piece of parchment paper too in between the iron and the napkin, just to make sure I don't burn anything. And I'm going to go over it really quickly. You don't want to leave the heat in any area for too long. You just really want to use the heat to smooth all the wrinkles out, and then you can move on to the next step. Of course, I'm sure you've learned by now, we're going to use the sanding block to sand away all of the excess napkin from around our shape. And you'll find that this is a whole lot easier to sand down than the vinyl or the scrapbook paper because it's so thin. So just be careful, don't go too hard or too crazy. Just use a really soft hand and be careful as you sand this down. We're going to do 2 more coats of Mod Podge over the top of the napkin before we seal this with our UV resin. Now again, like I've been saying, if you don't want to seal with the UV resin, you definitely don't have to. Just make sure you do maybe 2 or 3 coats of Mod Podge over your napkin to make sure that it's really well sealed. I'm going to wait about 15 to 20 minutes in between each of those coats, and after the second coat of the Mod Podge is dry, I'm going to add the UV resin. I'm using the same UV resin I've been using this whole time. This is from Counterculture DIY. You can get it on Amazon or from their website directly, so I will link it down below in the description box for you. And again, the glitter I'm using is called Chickalay, and it's from Peachy Olive Glitters, so I'll have that linked down below with a discount code for you as well. I used a little bit too much of the glitter in the UV resin, so the design kind of got a little bit glittered out, or like outshone by the glitter. So in hindsight, I would definitely use less glitter. Of course, you don't have to use any glitter at all if you don't want to, but I always think glitter makes things better. So you'll see me here kind of scrape a little bit of the glitter UV resin out and add a little bit more of the plain. I'm just trying to lessen the amount of glitter that we have mixed in, because I think it was just a little bit too much. So once that's all spread out, again, I'm going to let this sit under my UV lamp for about 2 minutes, and then we'll be ready to move on to design number 4. Now, if you're enjoying these techniques and design ideas, please be sure to give the video a big thumbs up down below. Subscribe to my channel if you are not already, so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. And of course, let me know what you think down below in the comments. All right, number 4 is a really fun one. It's also, in my opinion, I think the hardest one if you're not the best painter. We are doing hand-painted designs. Like I said earlier, I have been very into the fruit patterns lately, so I thought it would be fun to try and paint some cherries on this magnet. Now, of course, you can paint any sort of thing that you want onto your magnet or your shape. This is where you have the most creative freedom, I think, so feel free to do literally any sort of design you want. You don't have to do cherries, but I'm going to show you how I tried to paint some cherries on this magnet. I'm using acrylic paints for this, and starting out I'm using Touch O Pink from the Delta Creative Ceramcoat brand of paints. These are my absolute favorite acrylic paints. They are the best and they have such good coverage. Of course, as always in true Mal fashion, I'm using way more paint than you need, but whatever, it's just who I am at this point. So I'm going to do a really nice coat of this light pink paint all over the magnet, and then I'm going to let that dry for about 30 minutes before I move on to my next step. After my pink paint is dry, I'm going to take some red acrylic paint and start to create my little cherry bundles. I'm going to do 3 of these onto the heart, so I'm just starting out with some little dots to kind of map out where they're going to go, and then I'm going to turn those into bigger circle shapes. Now, these are not perfect by any means. They're definitely more abstract-y, kind of whimsical looking cherries, but that's okay. Art is supposed to be fun, so don't worry about making everything perfect. Just have fun painting whatever you're painting. After the red in my cherries was dry, I took some white acrylic paint and the end of my paintbrush, and I'm going to create some little shine dots. Just remember when you do this that you want your light to be coming from the same place. So don't put your dots all like willy-nilly over your cherries. Think about where the light is coming from and where that shine would be if the cherries were sitting there glistening in real life. Next we have our stems. So with a fine liner brush, I'm just going to draw my cherry stems the best I can. And once those are done, I'm going to take some tan paint and again the end of my paintbrush, and I'm just going to do some little polka dots all over the heart to make it look a little bit more whimsical and really lean into kind of the like kooky funness that this design gives off. I decided to leave this one as is with just the rough paint texture, so no sealing needed or anything. Now we are going to move on to our final design. This one I think is my favorite because it's more sentimental, a little bit more personal. We are finishing things off with photo magnets. This one is a twofer, so I'm going to show you how to make the magnets printing off your own pictures from your computer or using professionally printed photos. So I started off by measuring the size of my heart so that I could print out my image. And then I also grabbed a picture that I have just sitting around that I'm going to put on a magnet. So I printed this photo out on cardstock. I just put it into my Pages or Microsoft Word, whatever you want to use, cut it down to size and printed it out on just plain old white cardstock. And now what I'm going to do is put the heart over the image, kind of center us how I want us to be in the photo or in the magnet. And then I'm going to trace around the photo using the heart obviously as a guide. And then I'm going to just cut that image out by hand. I'm going to do the exact same thing with the professionally printed photo. And then we can adhere both of them to our magnets. Once again, we are going to use the matte finish Mod Podge to adhere both of these photos to our magnets. This Mod Podge really is the MVP of this video. Now, the application for both of these different paper types is exactly the same. I'm going to use the Mod Podge just the same way that we did with the scrapbook paper in the very beginning. I'm going to place a little bit of it onto the actual wooden magnet shape, and then I'm going to paint a little bit of it onto the back of our photos, and then we'll adhere them to the heart shapes. I will give you one guess as to how we're going to finish off the edges of our hearts. Yep, we are sanding them down. I did add 2 coats of the matte finish Mod Podge over the top of both of these photo magnets. And now what I'm going to do to finish off the edges is take some paint pens and I'm just going to paint the edges of the magnets. Now, of course, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. I primarily wanted to cover up the marks that I made with the Sharpie when I was tracing the outlines for the photos, but this is also a really fun way to add a pop of color, or if you don't like the raw wood look, you can paint the edges and make them really fun. Okay, all of our magnets are finished, so now the last step is to actually turn them into magnets. So I got this pack of round magnet pieces from Michaels. Now I'll admit these are not the strongest magnets, so when I make these again, I'll probably find some stronger magnets just so that they really hold things up, you know? But these work fine for what I wanted to use them for, but I would shop around and maybe find some stronger magnets if you can. Now I'm going to adhere these to the back of my wood pieces using UV resin, but you can use E6000 or any other strong glue that you prefer, so like a Gorilla Glue or something like that. You just don't want the magnets to fall off of the wood pieces, so I would recommend a stronger adhesive than like a Mod Podge or something like that. I wouldn't use that to adhere the magnets to your wood. So I'm going to do a little dot of the UV resin on the back of my wood piece, and then I'm going to stick that magnet into the dot. One thing I am doing is making the dot a little bit bigger than it needs to be because I want the UV resin to seep out from the sides of the magnet so that when I cure it, it's like really well cured and we don't have any uncured UV resin like around the magnet, if that makes any sense. So I'm just pushing it in and you can see that little pool of UV resin around there. I'm going to stick that under my UV lamp and that's going to really cure and get really hard and keep that magnet in place. I'm going to repeat that same process for the rest of my magnets and we are all done. So here are all of the magnets being put to use on my dry erase board. I really love how all of these turned out and I had so much fun making all of them. I really hope you all enjoyed watching this video and I hope it gave you some inspiration for some fun crafts that you can make. And yeah, if you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up down below. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my new videos. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Okay? Love you. Bye. Hello friends, thanks so much for watching this video. I want to say a huge special thank you to my elite fam, my channel members, and my subscribers. You all make this channel possible, so thank you so much for being part of the fam. If you want more exclusive content from me, you can join my elite fam at patreon.com/elitefam. You can find my tumblers and digital files on my website madebymalstudio.com. And if you'd like to follow me on social media, you can find me on Instagram at madebymal_studio. Here's another video for you to check out, and I'll see you soon. Thanks so much for watching. Love you. Bye.